Good evening and welcome to Latino Theater Company Live and today's conversation with A Mexican Trilogy, an American story. If you have been watching our virtual series, we have all of our entire trilogy up now. I think we just, Faith has been removed, but with Faith, Hope, and Charity. Hope goes all the way into the 22nd of October. And Charity goes all the way 10 days after tomorrow. That's October 30th. So make sure you watch that. You can watch it anytime. And Hope will be removed. And then hopefully there's word. We might get a confirmation maybe in this conversation today if it will come back as a full trilogy. But more on that. Today we're going to be having a conversation about the entire Mexican trilogy written by Evelina Fernandez, which was done separately throughout the course of the year. And then in 2016, we did it all three productions, 1, 2, and 3, Faith, Hope, and Charity, in one solid production, split up into multiple nights. And then on Saturdays and Sundays, we did it in 6-hour long run with a dinner in the middle. But more than that later, let's meet the entire company. Oh my God, right on time. Here we go. Hello, 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 hello. Hello! Hello, everyone.
Hello. Hi.
How's everybody doing?
Like a ghost.
We're good. We're good.
Well, thank you so much for our conversation. I know people have probably been dying to have a conversation with us as we've been having them weekly. We've been having readings. But there's so many other things going on before we get started. Go Dodgers and go Blue. We're struggling right now, but we have some good viewership numbers, which is great. We wanted to have this conversation talking about the trilogy, Faith, Hope, and Charity, which was written by Evelina. And Evelina, if we can start by how did you start writing this story? Did it all start as 3 plays, or how did the development start of the trilogy?
Well, I mean, as you probably know by now, the Latino Theater Company, we write plays about the U.S. Latino experience. In other words, Latinos living in the U.S. and the kinds of realities that we live in. And so I started with Charity, number 3. I wrote it, we read it, we thought it was okay. And then I wrote Hope, part 2. And then we did a reading of that at the theater. And the response of the audience was really, really positive. And so we thought, well, why don't we produce that one first? And then once we produced that, then that's when Jose Luis said, well, why don't we make this into like a trilogy? So then starting out with part 2, I kind of went to part 3 and then wrote part 1. So
wow.
Written out of sequence, and then kind of had to kind of put it together and kind of try to make everything fit together so that it is the story of one family over the span of 100 years. And also just think it's important to place us within an American context, right? So these are important eras, right? The Depression, World War II, the 60s, the Kennedy administration, part 3 was the death of Pope John Paul II. So I just feel like it's important that people know that we experienced those iconic historical events just like everybody else, but you rarely see us within that context in film, television, and theater. So I just felt that was important too. But when I say I always mean we, we as a company, we kind of do all of this together. It's not like I'm not like a regular playwright that just, writes plays and hopes that they get produced. I'm really, really blessed that I have an artistic family, which is the Latino Theater Company. We've been doing plays for over 30 years.
And the production, the individual productions were produced, as you mentioned. It started with Hope, part 2, went to part
3,
and then part 1, right?
Yeah, then we did part 1 last.
Was that difficult, or you had already written them?
It was difficult. I mean, just having to put the pieces together, because didn't start out as a trilogy, so we didn't start from the beginning to the end. So kind of had to put the pieces together so that the people in part 3 actually were the people that are in part 2, because originally they weren't. So Gina is Gina, and then Bobby and Bobby, and Johnny and Johnny, and so and then also Esperanza, the matriarch of the family, was not in part 2. So then when we put the trilogy together, that was really missing. And then so we try to figure out a place to put her in part 2. She's in there just for one scene with Gina, but she reminds her of the la palabra antigua. Yeah.
Right. For those of you that are watching us right now, the trilogy is playing. Hope and Charity are playing part 2 and part 3. Hope goes all the way to October 2nd, and Charity goes all the way to October 30th. And there's chisme going around that it might come back as a full, hopefully, if we're able to. But spread the chisme. But one of the things that in the play, so each play deals with a different pope, right, and a different war, right? Is that correct?
Not a different pope.
It's the same pope? Pope,
No.
Yeah. No?
I mean, go ahead, Lucy.
Did you say pope or hope?
Pope.
Right. The last one Pope is mentioned specifically, right?
Yeah.
But it is a different war in each of the
Well, in the first one there's a war, in the second one there's a war in each one. That's true.
Yeah, in all 3 of the productions.
Yeah.
We have the World War I, and then we have Vietnam, or World War II, Vietnam, and then we have the Afghanistan, Iraq war.
Which is history, basically.
Right. Yeah, and it as you.
But you don't usually see our participation in those wars, right? So that's the important thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and then how did that? So one of the things that, as we've been trying to put this up online, there's a lot of music in this, a lot of songs. There's singing. Part 2 has a lot of singing in it. Part 1 has a lot of singing in it too. And there's different. You see the history. You see the history of war, music. It was really cool watching it also because you see costume, how people dressed, even in the set, and then how people moved. I mean, I remember being in the rehearsal room, and then just the different things that Urbany was letting us know. Like, well, we did that back in the 20s and 40s. How did that come about and come to play when it all became one full in like part 1, part 2, part 3, to the idea to make it a trilogy, a full, to fully stage the 6 hours? Anybody?
Well, it was Jose Luis's idea to do a trilogy. I don't think that was on anybody's radar.
He's always the one with the big ideas.
Yeah, I mean, and we were like, really? We're going to keep people in the theater for 6 hours? What? I can speak to the music. I think music always defines an era. I mean, as soon as you hear music, it takes you back, or especially if you grew up with it, you immediately remember what was going on and everything. So I love the way Evelina uses music. She really pieces and Latinos love music, it's very historically specific and culturally specific. So I just feel like the music adds a lot, but that's not the question about the big trilogy idea. That's just the music.
Well, also the thing about the music is that I feel like people make assumptions about the kind of music that Latinos like. There's always the assumption that we like mariachi or we like, Tejano or whatever. But I know growing up, I mean, I listened to soul music, and, that was the kind of music that I liked and grew up with. And I mean, and as I got older, I started appreciating, more culturally specific music, more Mexicano mariachi. But it's important also that these teenagers in part two, are listening to the Shirelles and Martha the Vandellas and things like that. And then the parents are still singing the Mexican songs, like my parents were still listening to Edie Gourmet and Trio Los Panchos and, all of that stuff. And so Yerbani can speak more to the dancing part of it, because she kind of had to do the 40s, then the 60s, not so much in Charity, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Music for me is a motivator for sure. It inspires me. And yeah, there was a little bit of everything. So I got to do a little bit of everything there, from the swing to some of the Motown steps to the Shirelles and all that. But yeah, and bringing it all together, piece by piece on as well, doing some research and yeah. I'm sorry. What was the rest of the question, Javi?
No, just the start of the idea of making it a trilogy, of bringing the entire 3 productions together as one. Yeah, I mean, and this is to anybody, not just on the idea, but what was that process like?
Yeah.
Jose Luis, if you want to, you're muted though.
No se oye, Jose Luis.
What is important for us as a Latino theater company, to me, is the idea that we're capable of doing that, a whole epic 6-hour play. It's very few companies, and usually the ones who do it, like Nicholas Nickleby or Angels in America. I mean, these are huge productions with very big budgets. They usually tells you that the history of America, or the United States, or these other ideas. But for Latinos, so people of color, that becomes a big question mark. How can you tell us a story? How epic is your history or who you are? So that's important for us as a company, just to challenge ourselves artistically. Can we do this? I mean, this is one of the productions that, yes, we did it, and I always felt like I wish I can do this with lots of money, because the way we produce is like with very little money. If you really look into the set, it was interesting because I pay attention to this thing. You can see the rope that pulls the doors open. You can see on top of Jeff's head when he's at the radio station over there. Things like that, I mean, and the theater with money, you will never see that. You will never hear the sound of, what I mean? All those things that automatically move in and out, and sets come in and go. They have a lot of more resources. But the idea is that we can also do that with the resources that we have. That's really, really important. Now, a lot of people talk about trilogies. Everybody makes trilogies now. This is really a 6-hour play that we call it a trilogy. But the truth is, because we follow, in a way, one main character who's telling us a story of 3 different periods. And at the present, and Charity, she's life in that situation. So really, we call it a trilogy because the plays had 3 different names. But in reality, it's one play, who tell us the story or the history of Mexican Americans in the United States and the participation in war. Because the big conflict on the story is the war in everyone. That's what causes the demise of the family or the hopes of the family. And so in that way, it's just one play, really, because the characters follow each other. Charlie marries Elena, and they become the main characters of the second act of the play. And they have Gina, who becomes, the Gina as the daughter, who becomes the main character in Charity and his relationship. So it's not, because now I've seen a lot of people say this is a trilogy, like people thought that Solitude, Dementia, and something else was a trilogy. That was not a trilogy. That was 3 different plays. Of course, we can say, okay, this is a trilogy, and we can put Premeditation, Solitude, and Dementia together and say this is a trilogy, but it's not.
Do that.
But it's not really a trilogy because
I know.
one play doesn't have consequences for the next play.
Yeah, and I think this is truly a trilogy. Because you follow the same characters, even though most of the characters in part 1 are not in part 2, but most of the characters that are in part 2 are in part 3. So, it's important because the story of this family represents our community and represents the effect of certain, sociopolitical situations and how they affect us, like specifically, Johnny, Sal's character, right? In part 2, he's like, at the end of it, he's so full of hope and he's saying, Mom, I'm going to take care of the family, and goes against his father and everything. And then when you see him in part 3, Sal does this, beautiful monologue about what he saw in Vietnam, which I still find, says the playwright, I still find, very moving and very heartbreaking, that what happened to this young man who's so full of hope and in the future, and what did he become because of the Vietnam War, right? So that's why what Jose Luis is saying, yes, it is a true trilogy in that sense that you follow the family, over, to see what they're like as young people and as older people. Mm-hmm.
What was that experience? Go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was thinking because you were talking
you're
about
muted, Jeff.
Jeff, you're muted.
Oh, we can't hear you. I don't know why.
Jeff.
He's not muted?
No, he's not muted.
Oh.
We just can't hear him.
Jeff, say testing, testing, testing.
If you log out and log back in, it might work.
I was going to talk about the choreography and I was having so much fun. Even just looking at Hope, when I was looking at Hope, and all the gestures that you gave the singers to do, that was so detailed and it was so wonderful. Man,
you made him faith and faith. Faith and hope.
Faith and hope.
Yeah, in faith, Jose Luis is like, wow, those are nice moves my comadre gave them.
Yeah, I love when they were singing. The girls were singing together, and you gave them these movements and these gestures. When Esperanza, when the character of Faith is singing in the bar up there at the nightclub, you also gave her some hand movement. It was really beautiful. It was so detailed that it really evoked the period. This is what singers would do when they sang in that period. So all of that, so it was really great to see that at the same time, even in Hope, to see it in Hope, it's when they're all singing the same thing and then they're doing the different dances. inside the house and outside the house. So I think in that way, because that also what it does also culturally, it shows that young people at that period, that's what they were dancing, that's what they were doing, that's the music they were listening to, and they have they even got the they're acculturating much more and more and more and more as years go by. So I think that's really subliminal if you want to, but it's very important in the history of the development of Chicanos or Mexican Americans in the United States. So,
yeah, Jeff,
So,
are you
Jeff,
back?
what were you gonna say, Jeff?
I
Oh
can't hear
man,
you.
Oh my gosh, he's
No.
muted.
the volume up.
try
Maybe it's that.
try your mic or something.
Is the mic well connected? Connected well?
Oh man.
Yeah. Oh,
Well,
bummer.
I'll speak.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sal.
I'll speak. I just wanted to say that, when Jose Luis, my compadre, had this idea, it's a big idea. I mean, the trilogy is really, it's not, it's a very, I guess when he was talking about it, it seemed to me, how should I say, that it wasn't real, that we weren't really going to do it, but it sounded like a good idea. You know what I mean? Because it was a big idea. And, but, I think that's one of the great things about Jose Luis as a visionary, that he has these big ideas and we just go along with it, and we follow him, as his subjects. And he rules like a
I've
king.
often described the company as a benevolent dictatorship.
But it's really wonderful because it challenges all of us creatively, and it challenges, I think, Evelina as well, to create this amazing play. I mean, here you have this 5.5 hour play that who has, it's very rare, first of all, to have that, and then to have a company, a Latino Theater Company, put this on about our heritage, about our history, is really epic, and it makes a big impact, I think, in theater in general, but also to our community. And it was very challenging, to put that together. Here we are, changing costumes, as you know, you were part of it. Changing costumes at a drop of a hat, and to go into your next character, and to keep track of your entrances and exits, and what's next in terms of historically, and also just in terms of the structure of the play, and to make that all work. And Jose Luis is so talented in bringing that all together in terms of transitions. Yerbany is a stickler, and I know it better than anybody because just before this little conversation, when we were talking about different things, she said, "Well, what should I talk about?" And I mentioned one thing. She goes, "Oh yeah, that's when I told you to do something and you wouldn't do it." And so nobody knows better than me. But but all that is to say that it's a big production that we put together on a string budget, with not just obviously the company, but those of us who support us, and the designers and our staff, who is just amazing. And to put something together like this is pretty extraordinary and historic. And we do it for the community, we do it for the art, and it's an amazing piece of work that we are very proud of.
So, Javi,
Yeah.
on that, do I need to unmute myself?
I think you
No, you're fine. You're fine. You're fine.
Good.
On that note, as far as the process, going back to what Sal said, when this all starts at the table, is for me, I think, okay, where do we begin? Where do I begin? But you know, it evolves, and it's taken me probably up to Mother of Henry, where I was finally letting, you know, trusting that this is all going to come together. Maybe I was a little too relaxed, but it always comes together. But for me, every time we start, I have to learn. I try to tell myself this is going to come together. We're all going to bring this together, and it does. It happens, but it's always for me a process and where to start. Because, like I said, I like to come in with it. This is what we're going to do. What's the music? But it's taken me all these years to realize that it's just a process, and it's going to evolve as we go along. You know, but
it's not,
and it does. It comes together, but it's very overwhelming.
Yeah, but I feel like you have a process that we use, Yerbani. Just to clarify, Yerbani is our choreographer, and you know, I feel like there's a process where you bring us together at the beginning, and you show us a bunch of different steps, right? A bunch of different combination steps, you know, just like a cha-cha-cha step, and you go across the floor and cha-cha-cha and turn step and so then when you start putting it together, we have all these tools, right, in our toolbox, and you'll say, okay, remember this step and blah, 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 you know. So I feel like that's, I mean, it comes together, but there's definitely, you have a plan, right?
Yeah, we're going to use this somewhere. I'm trying to get a jump on it, because sometimes, you know, the music will change up to, we're not going to use this song here. We're going to, so it does come together.
I remember for the first couple, I mean, not the first couple rehearsals, but like every rehearsal, we had about an hour of just, you know, cha-cha-cha and like walking that way, and you're like, what are we doing? And it's like, doing. And then later on, you're in the play and you're like, oh, I'm doing that walk, you know, or like, I'm doing, it was all like meshed in, because it's, I mean, usually, right, you're just rehearsing one play of one era or maybe mix, but here we were doing 20s, you know, 60s, and then like 2003? Five. You know, different things. So I remember there was movements, there was like hand gestures, and then costumes came in, and, you know, that of course changed everything that was going on. And then at the same time, the music was also being developed, Rosino. You know, like it had been done before, but we were doing it like different. It sounded different. So working on, how was that like, Jose Luis? Did I?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, I thought like someone muted. I haven't seen Jeff. The difference between like rehearsing just one play did you rehearse each play individually, or did you just, you know, go from beginning to end?
We always do beginning to end. I mean, when the first staging part of it, I think we do that pretty quickly, you know. But of course, you have to know where you're gonna get to.
Right.
In this case, it's a long, you know, it's a very long journey. Understand? Because remember, we didn't have the breaks on the plays where the breaks happen. We have the breaks of the plays when the intermission of the second play happened. In a way, so the break was during the intermission was in the middle of Hope, and it was not necessarily at the end of Faith.
It was a play and a half and a play and a half.
Yeah. So that we needed to figure out, yes, how is that going to happen to be seamless? Remember, we came up with that idea. So the actor who was going to play all the roles in the next play will come in as the younger people will move out. You know, like when you and Olivia were in the front, then Jeff and Elia will come in behind you and take over the song and the holding of hands, and that will take to the next play. Or when we were going from Hope into Faith, we had to do the same with
Non Rudy.
Yeah, Sam and Esperanza, and then Robert and Evelina. So all those little details that it seem insignificant, if you want to, are so important to us for the storytelling of it. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to talk about my comadre because, you know, as directors, this is really important. It's not that easy to work with a choreographer. There is a lot of frustrated choreographers who want to be directors. So usually when you hire a choreographer, they're frustrated because they want to be directors, but they are choreographers. That's their job. You know, I have worked with a couple of them in my lifetime. Yeah. But what's happening with my I mean, it's to the point where we don't even have to have a conversation anymore. We kind of know. And what is so important for all of us to understand, our process is a true process of discovery. I mean, I do have the frame, I do know where I'm going, but we allow everything to grow from there. We're not set, and you know, and sometimes we change the song, or we cut it, or we add more song, or we change the dance, or we have to change the, you know, how I'm into blocking, I'm into composition, and to image making. When I'm directing, I want to see the right. And my comadre is very helpful for me to say, comadre, how is this working? You know, the triangles are fine with the diagonals one. Is, you know what I mean? All of this, it's a great collaboration that we have in a way that we already got to the point where we don't even have to talk that much about what the gestures are going to be, what the choreography is going to be, what the style is going to be. It kind of becomes part of the process, and you can see it when you see now the archival. It's great to see the archival because we see what we've done. It's hard to see it when you're performing. And it's really hard to see it when you're the director and you're performing it because you're concerned with the audience and the ticket sales and, you know, people do lines and the energy. I mean, there are other things. So seeing them now is interesting because it gives us a perspective, a better perspective of, you know, what he needed to improve or how they work.
Yeah, it's really the first time we've seen it, you know, because we've all been in it. So it's the first we get a chance to see it. You're funny. I was laughing because when I was watching Hope, you know, and I'm out there dancing in that dancing, and even when I forgot what other when I was dancing in Solitude, and then I forgot what other shows I was dancing in, and I was like, man, poor Yerbani. Honestly, I thought I was dancing good.
You were.
When I see myself dancing, I'm like, oh God, that's really bad.
Well, not everyone dances perfectly in the dance hall. That's okay.
Yeah.
If the book ever gets written on our process.
And he's spinning around. And
he's always going to spin.
Well,
but if the book ever gets written on the process, I think it's really, one thing is that Jose Luis is a director that he wants the actors to use their entire bodies. And so I know that whenever we work with people outside the company, and, you know, they want their lines, they want to know their blocking, and, you know, to start them off with, no, we're going to have an hour of just movement, and, you know, Yerbani's doing this for an hour, and you can see kind of like, well, why are we wasting time with this? You know, but it's so important that Jose Luis reminds us that as stage actors, you're using your whole body. Your whole body is used to tell the story, and so yeah, I think it's really fabulous that that he and Yerbani work us like that.
Yeah. Especially for like the 6-hour production. I mean, you really, at the end, you're like, it was like this boot camp to get there. So the 6 hours. Jeff, are you with us?
Can you talk?
Oh man.
Oh wow.
Are you on Chrome? That is so weird.
Oh, Jeff.
Can you hear us? Okay.
Oh.
If I talk, that's so strange. Sorry about that. I wish I can do something on my end, but I can't.
Well, one of the things that you can do is you can call Javi on his cell phone and talk in the cell phone.
If you go to audio, and then go, talk. There you are.
Hey.
The default mic was not the right mic.
Oh, there
Sorry,
you go.
guys.
Oh, there you go. Hi, Jeff.
Hello.
Well,
My 2 cents I was going to mention earlier was that Evelina conception was the 3 pictures that she always had at her house: the Pope, the President, and Cesar Chavez, which these iconic figures that are, the Pope may change, but not as quick as the presidents and as our iconic representatives of our culture. So to me, that was always a great starting point, for this. And what I wanted to say was interesting in this process, since we did them out of order, was when we did put them in order, it gave us a chance to go back and redefine some of the characteristics. Like, what was beautiful for me is I got to see you younger, and then I got to then add elements that you brought to it to incorporate into my performance. And the same thing with what's his name?
Julio.
who do you mean?
Who played my son? Kenny, who played my son. I brought elements of him into it later on. And that was a really cool thing that we hadn't experienced before, to be able to arc these characters in a way that we haven't done before. Not to say that when we did it out of order that the play wasn't, solid and good, but it just brought more information as for an actor to incorporate and add more layers to it. So that was really a cool thing.
Now that you mentioned Kenny, man, shout out to all our younger actors. They're so good. They're just so good. Fantastic singers. Went with the program, incorporated the movement. We're so lucky to know these people. And that's you, Javi. Of course, you're included in that.
Ooh, young guy.
Yeah.
I think also what's important when we were going to do Solitude, okay, it's important conversation, not to forget. We talk about virtuosity, the virtuosity of the actor, who is never talked about anymore in theater making. You remember, the idea of those long monologues, how you don't see that in contemporary playwriting anymore, where an actor can take a 5-minute monologue and make it work, or 3, 5, 4 pages monologues, or this idea of virtuosity. And what is exciting about looking at the trilogy is because we're bringing the younger generation, and showcasing all their talent, as part of the big landscape of the company. We know the company has a lot of experience, has a lot of stage experience. And stage experience, it means a lot when you're an actor for the theater. It gives you a certain facility to understand space and time and all of that. So it's interesting that, or this would have been, of course, there's going to be dementia, but this would have been the last showing of the archivals, even though The Mother of Henry was after this. But if you see how interesting we go from Premeditation, Solitude, La Víctima, it was all the company doing all the main characters, doing all the roles and stuff. And then gradually we start introducing a new generation.
Right, La Olla Trilogy, Mother of Henry.
That's correct. And it's really exciting. Not that the company is not part of it, but particularly in the trilogy, the younger people have a lot bigger roles to play
Oh yeah.
than in a regular show. Meaning, somehow the company played very solid roles and big roles, but they were not the leads inside the play, which is fascinating to me that without having the conversation, we as a company were smart enough to think about, well, let's move it this way. So that's, and also because when you were young, had the opportunity to play a role in a 6-hour play as an actor,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, to
and
piggyback on what you were, go ahead.
no,
go-
go.
I was just going to say, to piggyback on what you were talking about, Jose Luis, is in terms of the showcasing. Yeah, this piece really showcases. It's an actor's showcase because we get to play so many different characters, and I mean, and the company members also shine. I mean, Lucy took on the role of Ofelia Medina, who is, she's an icon in Mexico as an actress, and she was amazing in that role, and I was really impressed with Lucy's work taking on that role and really delivering, and proud of her. And everybody in the company, I think, was really fantastic in it.
And not only that, she was playing the older role, she actually played her young.
Right.
And
Right.
as
Yeah.
father, meaning that's kind of so cool to see that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think as you were mentioning, I mean, I think when we were talking about going back and talking about the 6-hour play, the marketing, A Mexican Trilogy, and as you mentioned, that we were telling this American story. I mean, more and more now, we're learning that Mexicans or Mexican Americans or Latinos have been a part of every U.S. war. But one of the things, even as the characters, is like we weren't, as even for me or maybe a lot of us, the story that we hear, it's like it wasn't the tradition like what we always see on TV or on stage. Like we were playing, we were miners and we were soldiers on the and every war. And then I think at the end, Charity, they were lawyers or no, where he worked in what was
Or Robert Beltran's.
Robert Beltran's role.
He was a professional.
He was a professional, but we had like these,
because it's missing from the standard American narrative.
Right.
Our contribution and our participation in this country for years and years and years and years. I just saw the coolest documentary really quick, and it's called The Secrets of Spanish Florida. And so it talks about the people that first settled, not non-indigenous people that first came to this continent. And the group, yes, it was the what do you call it? The voyage was paid for by the Spanish king. But the people in there, they were from all over Europe and even Africa. And so it was a very different experience that nobody knows about. And that at the time of the 13 colonies, and we all grew up with that knowledge, right? 13 colonies. There were 15 colonies. There was East Florida and West Florida. But they didn't know how to deal with those two colonies, so they just left it out in the narrative.
Yeah.
It's really good. So it makes me go, what else don't I know?
Yeah, the untold stories. They're untold stories, and
right.
And it's history. It's history of this country that is not told, and there's so much of it that, it's kind of like our responsibility to tell our stories, because if we don't tell them,
yeah,
they may not be told. They could disappear,
Right.
Yeah.
I want to let those that are watching know, if you have a question, please type it in the comments section. We do have we have a couple from Juan Luis. But this is a first one. Is I want to know how receptive was the audience doing the full on 6 hours production, like the production of Mahabharata or today's Harry Potter, and what was on the dinner menu? Dinner menu was La Parrilla, Boyle Heights, East LA classic. That we actually was really cool is that we got to be a part of that also, like sit and have dinner with them in full on, like, you know, either we're wearing a mustache or whatever, and then go back on. But how if anybody wants to answer the other ones, how was receptive with the audience?
Kudos to the staff that I guess Jose Luis came up with this idea. I don't know who came up with this idea of making it such an event. And during the dinner, we often had invited somebody pretty prestigious within the community to highlight their own history and their family history. And I think people responded so favorably to that. And they were really, the people we asked, they were really cooperative and happy to do it and tell us, how they first got here and what their family did. And I think that was a brilliant idea. And how the staff pulled that off was amazing.
Yeah, legacy nights, right? There were legacy nights.
But the thing
in terms of like the audience, go ahead.
No, I want to talk about the legacy night.
Okay.
It was the best way to us to sell the theaters. So if you bought the theater, house, then you will be able to tell your family story during dinner time. We will provide the dinner, and then we did the meaning every person who bought the night, we created a wall for them with photographs of their family and the actually history of that particular family. And because we have a lot of families who lasted many times, who are being here for
many
generations. Yeah,
that's for you, Juan Luis. And the audience for 6 hours, it was amazing. People thought people would say, "Oh my God, I didn't even know it was 6 hours."
They all said it didn't feel like 6 hours. I mean, I'm sure there were people who thought, "Man, this is long." But I mean, I was amazed. Watching part 3, that the audience, that was videotaped at the end of a 6 hour play.
Yeah.
And so that audience had sat through 6 hours, right?
Right.
They were so responsive and they were so into it, and just jumped to their feet at the end of it. And I'm like, wow, how do you do that when you've been sitting in the theater for 6 hours?
Yeah, that was amazing, because I remember audience, for just a little background. Thursdays we used to do part 1, which was it was faith and half of hope, and then on Fridays we would do the second part of hope and charity, and then sometimes and then Saturdays and Sundays was the entire 6 hours. And I remember people were buying the Thursday or Friday tickets, and then those that bought the Saturday and Sundays were like, "Oh, here I go, going for the long stretch." But at the end of the night, when we finished with the big song, as Evelina, you mentioned, and they rose up, they all rose up with us, and they were like, we made it together, and it was always, I remember always being there. It's like, and even for us in like from a marketing standpoint and production and producing, it was like we should have always done the 6 hours. I think that was like a learning thing, because it was scary at first. Are people gonna stay? And even people buying tickets are like, am I gonna really sit down? And it was because you really, like, they were waiting to go back in there, and they were with us the entire time, and you were able to see, just like as Jeff was mentioning, like, oh my God, that guy played that guy, and he did this, and look how he's walking, and look how he's moving, and they became sort of like connected with us in a way, because they were having dinner together at the same time, and and then, you know, sitting there in the theater for 6 hours.
Yeah.
Let's see. Evelina, how was it like? Talk about your experience as an actor in your own play.
Oh, well, I'm so used to it. You know, it's not a big deal anymore. It's never been a big deal because, you know, we've been working together for so long. And just because it's my play doesn't change my process as an actor. In fact, I always get mad in rehearsals when I'm like, I ask for a line and they go, well, don't you know it? You wrote it. And I'm like, well, I wrote it, but I didn't memorize it. You know? So I'm really used to it. Really, really used to being in plays that I've written. And you know,
Yeah.
the weird thing is to be in a play that I haven't written. That's really scary. It's really scary when that happens. Yeah.
Will Evelina write a sequel to Juan Fran's section ambiguous, naive, hopeful, curiosity? What?
Juan Fran.
Well, actually, I'm developing the trilogy for television, and so yeah. So Juan Fra, yeah, he has a bigger life. Absolutely. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but he has a bigger life, and you know, you know, becomes he is an important part of part 3, and so since the trilogy for television takes place in part 3, and then Esperanza takes us back to, you know, the 40s and the 60s, you know, in her memory. But yeah, so it's I wouldn't call it a sequel. It's not Juan Fra's
Juan Fran sequel.
series, but he does have because what Juan Francisco represents in the play is the full circle, right? So you watch this family who comes to this country full of hope, right? And in search of a better future for their family. And then over generations, over the years, they've become cynical, you know, more and more cynical. They've lost their roots. You know, they don't speak Spanish anymore. They don't, you know, they're not as close to their culture. You know, it happens to all of us, right? Every generation changes. I mean, I have nieces and nephews who don't speak Spanish at all, you know, and are really pissed off about it now. You know, why didn't you guys teach us Spanish? You know, I mean, our kids speak Spanish, but a lot of my nieces and nephews do not, you know. So it's just a thing. It happens. It's assimilation, right? So what Juan Fra represents in part 3 is, you know, the cycle continues. It just continues, you know, and we continue to come in search of a better life. And so Juan Fra, you know, joining the military, you know, and it would be interesting to know that when I wrote the play, I knew that there were undocumented soldiers, right? I knew that there were undocumented people who enlisted. But, you know, now all these years later, we know that many of those soldiers who fought have been deported, right? And they went to war thinking they were going to become citizens, but they've been deported. So there's a whole community at the border of these soldiers who fought, but nonetheless have been deported and, you know, still fighting to try to make their way back here. You know, many of them, you know this country much more than, you know, their country of birth, you know. So that would be interesting to know. I mean, in the television show so far, he doesn't join the military because, you know, we're going to show him in his life working in Bobby's shop and, you know, all that stuff. But yeah, I love that character though. He's a beautiful character. And Javi, you were really good in Charity. You're
Thank you.
rich.
You know, thank you. I got to see it finally, and it was that was the most challenging role ever. I mean, if you look at me as Charlie, I'm like, and then in for Juan Fry, it's like, don't move, don't you dare move your feet. Jose Luis was like, come here, don't move your hands, don't look around, don't move your feet. And it was all, you know, it's a lot of it was. I remembered a lot also, like when we were playing, when I was doing Eunomia. It's like, don't go into the stereotype of like, oh, I'm a woman, like how people play women, right? Yeah. It's like, no, you're a woman. I remember this also. It's like, don't go to the stereotype of the immigrant. It's like, no, you're really smart, and you're, you know, it's not like the, so it was like just being grounded, you know, as much as possible. And just looking at it, you know, it's very interesting because I know those like that type of character, you know. I had cousins like that would come, and like the Bradbury building and stuff like that. And you're like, what do you do? No, like we don't go there, you know.
Yeah, and the thing about, you know, Juan Fra is it was a fine line that you played, right? Because you were naive, you know, trying to understand your world, you know, but there's, you know, an innocence and also an honesty, you know, that I feel, you know, that made the character so beautiful, you know. And the audience, when you go, who are you for? Who are you for? When they play soccer, are you for the U.S. or for Mexico? It was just like waiting for your Rudy's response, right?
Yeah, that was amazing. Listen, we're coming out of our final couple of minutes. I'm just gonna share some comments here from people, which are really good. We got Juan Luis. He watched them back to back, part 2 and 3. Agreed, felt amazing. I want the Juanfa play. Silvia Cervantes Blushers. It was a marathon worth experiencing. It's a testament to the writing, directing, and acting that only the nalgas were tired by at the end of the night. Greg, I saw it all live in one day, and I absolutely riveted every second of it. I found it to be sweeping, epic, truly American story, Pulitzer Prize worthy. Yes.
Yeah.
Superb.
Thank you.
Yes. So will there ever be a stage, a 6-hour saga again after the virus is over? We may have to. People are going to want to go out.
We shall see.
Let's hope.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Hope is still on for a couple days. Comes out and it will be pulled down on the 22nd. And Charity runs all the way to October 30th. You can watch it anytime on YouTube. Also, Hope is on Charity on Vimeo, but also it looks like it's playing on YouTube, so you might be able to check it out on that. And it'll be pulled down tomorrow. And then hopefully we're in the works of maybe bringing it back, but we'll let you know more on that shortly. Please watch it. You can watch it anytime. Share it. Share the link for free. You can watch it. And especially in this moment in our time in our country, these are the plays that people should be watching and get to know our story, so that we can change history.
So shout out to our friends that are watching from Mexico City.
Hello.
Hola. Y también, ¿quién más? Juan Luis, gracias por estar aquí con nosotros. And Wayne and Sylvia and everybody else is here. Thank you. Love you all.
Thank you.
Love you all, guys. Thank you.
Love you all.